is Gaughan, and I'm the Secretary of the Royal Academy of Medicine Student Section. Today we will be filming a conversation with Professor Mary Cannon and Mr. Peter McCartan on student mental health and well-being. Mr. Peter McCartan is a clinical social worker and psychotherapist who currently works part-time with the Student Counselling Service in Trinity College. Professor Mary Cannon is a consultant psychiatrist in Beaumont Hospital and Professor of Psychiatric Epidemiology and Youth Mental Health in RCSI. They are joining us in a personal capacity not affiliated with their institutions. We also have Anurag, President of the Student Section, and Elena, our PRO. We will now be spotlighting Mary and Peter for the duration of the conversation.
So starting off with the first question about college, what is your advice for managing anxiety levels during exam time, particularly with COVID and the current restrictions on gyms, seeing friends to relieve stress and all of that?
Well, I suppose in a way the stress related to exams is you know, it's always there. So, you know, the usual strategies that you would use for exams, you know, like being as prepared as possible and knowing the basics very well, not getting too hooked up on the minutiae of your subject, and not, you know, be realistic about your aims and what you can achieve. Don't put too much pressure on yourself, particularly at the moment. I think these are all strategies for, you know, for dealing with exams. With regard to the you know, things being closed in the gyms and seeing friends, I mean, as we'll be discussing later, there are things you can do, you know, even if to work around the restrictions that we're all facing at the moment. Peter, do you have anything to add on that?
I concur with what you're saying, Mary. I think the other thing that is important when I'd be thinking of exams is the notion of a routine, a daily routine, that you have a plan, that you know, not only about when you go to bed, but when you get up in the morning. Sometimes it's quite difficult because, particularly with COVID, a lot of students are back at home or in their accommodation and they haven't been out for weeks and months. And one hour blends into another. So it's the idea of how do you maintain some type of a routine to have something resembling a regular sleeping routine, that you go to bed on time, get up at the same time in the morning, and get dressed, have some breakfast, actually, and then plan your day or plan your week. What lectures are on today? What am I doing today? And building into that, times to have something to eat, also time for doing some exercise, getting up and going for a walk or going for a run. And also building in social time, keeping contact with those that are important to you, whether it's your friends, whether it's your family, or looking, and also just taking time to breathe, just taking some time to breathe. How am I going today? And particularly, I suppose we will come to it again, but COVID has brought into sharp relief that if you are having difficulties with stress or anxiety or depression or relationship difficulties, COVID hasn't made any of those things any easier. In many ways, it has magnified them. And I suppose the big thing that happens for a lot of, or not for a lot, but for some students, is an acute sense of isolation, that you're on your own and that the usual supports you have, they're not there, or you can't access them, or you don't want to be annoying somebody. There's lots of reasons. So the good things are around having a routine, and as Mary says, you know, preparing well for the exams, and also give yourself room. Also remember that the colleges themselves will also be supporting you. They're not out to sort of say, well, who can we throw out here, or who can we find out? They're there to support. And I think using the college supports through the tutor systems, through the lectures, is a really important thing, that you get some idea, and using your peers to get an idea of what are we doing here, what are we looking for. So again, it's about planning.
Yeah. What do you think yourselves, guys? I mean, is it more stressful now, do you think, doing exams in this kind of virtual world?
I think it can be, particularly because we don't really have that environment anymore to go into an exam hall. You know, that builds up. I feel like we get more adrenaline rush, and I think anyway, I perform better in that environment. When I'm stuck at home, it doesn't really put me in the right mindset. So I find it very difficult. And even just studying as well, over the last couple of weeks being with lockdown, just been stuck in my room. You know, I haven't really been able to go anywhere, do anything, see friends. So it's just been difficult.
That's true. I mean, I think it's a very different way of learning, isn't it, from online lectures. And it doesn't work for some people because, I think some people need the cues of, oh, I remember that lecture, that's the day that, and you can put yourself back in the place where you were. But I think, you have to build up your own strategies with the online lectures, I think, and try and, make them seem more like a lecture. So you get dressed up, as Peter was saying, get out of bed, don't be sitting there in your pajamas and just pretend you're at a real lecture and have some cues around that you'll remember this. You can distinguish this particular online lecture from the others. But the exams, yeah, it's as you say, sometimes people do need that adrenaline urge, and it's not there, but that can be good too. That can hinder your performance as well. So there's some good aspects to it.
And I suppose one of the things is that instead of having what happens usually for students is having collective panic, you panic on your own. It's the idea of it. And it is, but and one of the, again, the key thing for me, I think sometimes is that as students is to keep contact with each other, whether it's your class group or your friends, to communicate with each other. And sometimes that can be that you just want to chat, but other times you never know who might be needing a bit of help or a bit of support. And that can be quite a difficult thing coming up to exams, because exams are all about me and about how am I performing, what am I doing? And yet we know in this situation that is the me can actually include those that are your friends in college that you know and that they might benefit from it. And also the ways that we communicate around exams, that we share knowledge and share information. That's been my experience. It might not be yours, but how we go about, how do we retain that if possible in a situation where isolation is at the core of where we're at.
I've also been finding that since the lectures are online and a lot of them are recorded, it takes a lot more motivation to go through the lectures. So I could have, let's say, a list of like 8 lectures that I need to go through. And I also have the liberty of going at like ×2 speed. So then if I do that, since I have that choice, I'd be learning better if I did watch it at the normal pace.
That's true, actually. I think you're right. And a lot of students are beginning to identify that as an issue, that they would prefer a live lecture. Rather than the recorded. I mean, you could have it recorded for later, but I think having it live, that you have to log in at a certain time and be ready and be there with this collective experience, would be better. So perhaps, hopefully, colleges may move more towards that if students ask for it. Some courses do it more than others, but a lot of courses now are just having the pre-recorded lectures. And as you say, it can build up. You can let it pile up. We're all guilty of that, of procrastinating. I'll do that tomorrow.
And this is it's also a two-way street, in the sense that you're representing your peers, is that to give feedback to colleges, that likewise lecturers, that they turn up on time, that they present material that's worth listening to, and that they engage with you, even if it is remote. It requires a lot of effort, and also that the schools and that the lecturers are, engaged in doing their best to facilitate you and to acknowledge the challenges in the work.
I think.
So shall we move on to discussing, I guess, looking after ourselves over the Christmas break, and everything that'll throw up this year, being the way it is.
Yeah.
I mean, Christmas will be definitely challenging, particularly for the students who cannot go home. And I think they're the ones we need to think about at the moment, because there's a lot of international students, particularly the medical student community. And I think basically the key thing, again, linking back to what Peter was saying, is to create a sense of community, to link up with each other, the ones that are left behind, and the ones who are based in Ireland or in Dublin could maybe reach out and stay in touch, and don't. There's a tendency at Christmas to go back to your own family and sort of hole up with your own people, if you like. But I think now more than ever we need to reach out to our friends and our colleagues, and a lot of the colleges are running events during the Christmas for and providing dinners and get-together places for socially distanced, for students who they know will be here apart from their families.
Yeah, and again, I would agree with that. I think also for students around that, particularly I've worked with students who've been living in student accommodation provided by colleges, and it's like the Mary Celeste at Christmas for some of the students around that there's nobody around. So the idea of, as Mary was saying, of having a buddy system, making some contact, putting a note up on a notice board to say, hear anybody around, meeting up, having a coffee, going for a walk, doing something constructive and healthy. And because and also for foreign students, or any student, to keep contact with your family and make the effort to be in contact with them and to engage with what's on around you. But likewise, as Mary's saying, that each of the colleges has student counselling services, and that they're to contact someone to say hello to, not to feel isolated, because it can really be a very traumatic time for people, particularly if you're really feeling a bit vulnerable, or if you're worried or concerned, and that lots of students have issues around financial worries and how they're going to cope. So there's lots of other worries that come into people's lives. And I also think that it doesn't only include for students who are not from Ireland, but for any student, that Christmas time is that contradictory thing. On the one hand, it's all about celebration, but it's also for a lot of people who grieve, who are bereaved, that Christmas time can be a really sad time too, because all the memories of the person who is gone come to the fore. So it can be a really challenging time. So to look after yourself and to look for support. And I had one young woman, and her thing was that she wanted to get in touch with her church. And she came from an evangelical background. So we worked out, where was the local church to get in touch with, and the chaplaincy service. And she found that answered her question. I was thinking all these wonderful things, and her question was a much simpler answer. Go find somebody that you can talk to, and go to connect with people from your own culture or community. Go find the local restaurant if you're from whatever country, and you might find someone, or go online and you'll come across someone somewhere to make contact with. Yeah, so I think a really important group of people to pay attention to. Yeah.
And just to add to that, I think just the sense of community that you were talking about, I almost feel like we as students, especially those that are living here and, can go back to their families, it's also important for us to reach out to those that can't and have no one. I know that a few of us, I've invited some friends over from my classmates over for Christmas dinner, just because I know they'll be alone probably, so it's just a nice thing to do. But also I know some people have organized their own Christmas dinners with just a few other people they know are going to be alone in different student accommodations. So just to have, I think, that sense of community, reaching out ourselves and thinking of others, like you were saying, it can be, we usually just think of family. But particularly now.
You could have a joint Christmas dinner. Everyone bring a course, or bring your own nationality food, your food from your own country with it, because everyone has different kinds of Christmas dinners. It could be quite fun, and and maybe meet up on Stephen's Day to go for a walk. These kind of things. So a bit of planning ahead would be great actually, and relieve that anxiety about Christmas.
Exactly, yeah.
Are there any specific particular morning or nighttime exercises that somebody could do to improve mental well-being?
Well, yes, I think, as we've been talking about already, I think having a routine is really important, and getting up, get up at a reasonable time. Don't start staying in bed till 12 o'clock. That is a disaster in terms of your routine. So even if you think, oh, I work best at night, I'm going to do look at my lectures at midnight, that's everything is going to go out of kilter for you. You won't be able to sleep if you're lying in bed till late, or taking naps in the afternoon. That's also, you need to get back to the mindset that I'm getting up, I'm at college, this is my day at college. Some people find going out for a walk in the morning is good before you start into your day of lectures, online lectures. Having a good breakfast is key, of course. And some people find actually starting the day with a period of meditation, even a 5-10 minute meditation, can clear your mind. And again in the evening, or it might suit better in the evening, and you get a lot of these things on YouTube with guided meditations, just little snippets. It doesn't have to be half an hour, just a small little period of 5 to 10 minutes can be very useful.
And I think in addition to that, again, Mary, is that idea around sleep is really important. But one of the funny thing is that when we talk about how do we change our sleep pattern, is that quite often, because you're out of sync, that 1 hour drifts into the next, as I was saying, that you're going to bed later, getting up later. But how do you change that system? It's a bit of a challenge if you actually start at the going to bed end. Because if you start that and sort of say to yourself, well, I'm going to go to bed at 9 o'clock tonight, and you haven't been in bed for months before 1, it's not a good idea, because you're probably just going to go to bed and just lie there thinking of great thoughts. It's actually maybe better to look at it at the other end. So instead of saying to yourself, instead of getting up at 12:30, is to set your phone for 7 o'clock or 7:30, whatever time you would normally get up, and then to get yourself up out of bed. So if you're breaking that cycle, so that your natural body rhythms are that when you do come to 10 o'clock at night, you're tired. So it's better to think about how to tackle this, is to tackle it in the morning, about going to sleep, and you're thinking that's odd. But maybe in terms of that rhythm of our bodies, to think about it in the morning is a good idea. And again, having something to eat, really important. Living on a staple diet of pot noodles, chicken nuggets with the odd chips, or maybe pasta thrown in, not a good idea. You know, we all know that's a rubbish bloody diet, but your medical students wouldn't do any of that sort of nonsense. But the types of things, so looking at the diet, to actually have something that's nutritious, and to snack during the day, and to also punctuate your day. Ron see it at the 2 bookends of morning and evening, but during the day, to have time that you eat properly, that you take some rest. And my key thing is that we can survive without food all day, but we can't survive without being hydrated. So you need to drink water, and drink it regularly throughout the day. And that's really important. And also at night times, it's around when do we have our last meal, to make sure that it's not too late at night. And also, again, the whole thing of around our health now is, if we're taking alcohol, how much are we taking, when are we taking it, and who are we taking it with? Are we taking alcohol on our own? And it's a really difficult place to be. And also the whole world of both prescription drugs and non-prescription drugs that people take. And again, that's a whole world in itself, and that can become part of that routine. Well, sure, I'm not doing anything, so I don't mind if I have a joint, or I don't mind if I have a drink, and sure. And after a while, they become established patterns. So they can also be really challenging patterns to attend to, and that they can be quite difficult to get back out of when you get into them. So sorry, that's not to say negative things, but it's around just acknowledging the challenges.
Yeah, that's all very good advice. Particularly with the sleep thing. I've never actually thought about it.
Pardon?
Trying to get myself. I've never thought about it in the sense of trying to get myself up earlier rather than going to bed earlier. And you're right. I just stay there for 4 or 5 hours, just sitting and waiting for sleep to come. So I will try that out the next time. So just moving on more to kind of anxiety related to COVID and what's going on at the moment. I know as medical students, we're very guilty of this, but how do we handle that health anxiety that we're constantly getting? Again, with COVID, I know I'm in placement sometimes and I have a bit of a sniffle. I'm immediately, immediately thinking I have COVID, I have to go home, I have to ring up, get a test, all this sort of stuff. So how do we handle that really? How do we sit ourselves down and be like, okay?
Yes, it's a real problem at the moment, and I think you've you've identified that medical students are particularly at risk of this. I suppose you're more exposed than other students might be. I think it's really important to limit your exposure to the endless news cycle about COVID. I think that's really important. I mean, I was guilty of that myself in the beginning. We were watching endless news and press briefings, these daily press briefings, waiting to see what number of deaths are coming out and the number of people in ICU and the number of cases. And it just seemed to be endless, and there was no light at the end of the tunnel. But now I suppose things, I think there's a little bit of hope now. There's a little bit of light at the tunnel, and I think we're realizing during this second wave, if you like, it seems to have been less. I suppose the mortality has been lower. So, this virus is becoming something that, we may have to learn to live with rather than be afraid of dying of, especially for young people. The it's just important not to, as you say, catastrophize every single symptom that you have, and just, you know, most of the symptoms are not COVID, and you know, you know that rationally, but it's very hard emotionally. You feel every symptom is COVID related, but most of them aren't, and most of the tests that people have done are not positive. You have to keep telling yourself this: the chances are I don't have it, instead of the chances are I do have it. But you know, it's yeah, just to get through it, and just also be conscious that the more anxious you get, that anxiety, of course, can affect your whole body through the fight or flight mechanism, and that in itself can lead to a cycle of more symptoms. You know, so that you breathe faster, you feel sweaty, you feel tense, you feel faint, and then you get more anxious, and then you feel worse, and so the cycle. You need to recognize the cycle for what it is and try and break into it in some way, as I've been saying, some anxiety management techniques.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the other thing that strikes me is that talked about the catastrophizing response that we can have. The opposite is also true. The minimizing response. I'm okay. I can tough it out. I'm made of tough stuff. I can keep going, and that's equally as risky a strategy as catastrophizing. And it's about being sensible, and actually listening to your body, listening to where you're at, and reading your own. If there are symptoms, to actually respond to them and say, are there a range of options for this, rather than just it's all COVID? I might have a cold. I might have actually hurt myself, and I do have a pain in my back. Whatever it is, or I could be coming down with something. I need to check myself. That's, you know, the research is saying that, and the anecdotal evidence that lots of people aren't going to see their GP, aren't going to look for support because they're afraid, or for whatever reason. Yet other serious illnesses can be working away very nicely, thank you very much indeed, and love being ignored. So it's about paying attention. I suppose in a simple way, when I was thinking of this area, it was about how to respond, and I was thinking in terms of three areas. One was about your body, your mind, and your spirit. And I think in terms of bodily, we've already mentioned it. It's around your diet, that you look after it, that you stay hydrated, that you take exercise, that you actually get proper sleep if at all possible, that you look after your body, that it's the only one we have, so we better look after it. That piece. The piece about your mind is that catastrophic thinking, but it's around what do we know helps, is that having some order, having some routine works, having a focus for yourself, and also within how you think about the things that you prioritize and that are important. There's something around, somebody says, you know, have you seen anybody lately? No, I've been so busy, I haven't spoken to anybody in weeks. I'm thinking, cheapers, you need to pay attention to that. You need to pay attention to talking to your friends every day. For some of it's about talking to your family every day, and about if you're at home a lot of the time, are you getting out of home? Are you talking to your mom and dad? Are you talking to your brothers and sisters? Or are you just saying, well, I'm so busy, I can't talk to anybody? So it's around, and also looking at the whole world of academia and looking after your mind about, am I keeping up to the work? Am I engaged with it? Am I doing the coursework? Am I feeling, yeah, I'm okay. I'm a bit anxious, but I'm going okay. I've done and if I'm in first year, second year, or third year, yeah, I know the routine for this. I'm in fourth year, don't panic, I'll be okay. Whereas the first years, God love them, they were, since February last year, like a lot of those students did their mocks, and we're beginning to hear about COVID. Then their leaving cert went up the Swanee, and some of them are still involved in the bloody thing. And then they come to college, and it's like a virtual experience of college. So something around, and then you have the students at the other end, the other extreme, who are thinking about finishing, and thinking about the future, and thinking about work, and they're thinking, I need to get out of here, I need to move on, and where am I going? And the traditional responses we had, well, I'm going to travel, I'm going to go and work somewhere else, I'm going to do a nice rotation that I'd like, and they may or may not be available to you. So those anxieties that come with that. So how do you look after that? So stuff like, if you like reading, then continue to read novels, listen to music, do something. get out and go to the gym. And gym in Trinity, they've tried to combine a combination of looking after both your body and your mind by going to the gym and getting involved. And finally, the spirit one is about spirituality. It's also about, as in looking after who you are, because we're also living in a world now where existential questions have come in. What is the meaning of bloody life? Is there a future? You know, what are we doing here? Why? And it is quite a difficult thing, because you also are a generation who are much more aware of the impact of climate change, and that you're thinking and worrying about that, and then you add in COVID on top of the bloody thing. So it's about the meaning, and these are not existential as in not important. They're really important things to think about. So doing, as Mary said, doing meditation, doing some mindfulness work, doing anything that gets you involved in allowing you to actually find a place in your life, in your life for how you manage and cope with the challenges that come with life. And likewise, in families, where about your relationships with your family and those closest to you, they don't happen by accident. You have to work hard at them. And thankfully, most of us have relationships that we can depend on and look for support from. But there's also a cohort of people, and that you may know some, who don't have that familial support or friendship support. And that can be and you might be one of them. And it's around, how do you handle that and how do you manage it? So looking for advice or support is much better than being on your own and feeling there's nothing I can do about this. So yeah, my thing is that to look after your body, your mind, and your spirit. And if you can hold a lot of those things, then that could be of some benefit to you.
Yeah, and another question with that. I know you spoke about this earlier about getting a good sleeping pattern, but when you're trying to get a good night's sleep, how do you go about trying to make a good sleeping pattern and getting a good night's sleep? Especially if you're staying in this, like you're staying in the house all day. So you're there all day and then you're there at night and you wake up in the same place again. So do you have any recommendations for that?
Yeah, I think the key thing is to get out of your room. There's a tendency to study all day in the room and then have to sleep in the cell. Get out of the room and break that cycle. Going for a walk is really important. Now I know that it's dark in the evenings, but you can still go for walks. If there's a family pet, you can take the dog for a walk. They'll be delighted. You could cook a meal. I mean, we were talking about meditation or mindfulness, but sometimes just cooking or baking something, that's a form of mindfulness in itself, because you're focusing on it, and it's something that, you know, something outside yourself. And you know, some people like to, and of course that'll help family relations. If you're cooking meals for everyone, it's a great way to make friends. So another key thing is, and this is pretty basic, but I'm sure you all know it, no phones in bed, and laptops. That is a real killer of sleep. Some young person gave me a tip: don't have a plug. Have your bed somewhere away from a plug socket. You know, so you know you can't have your phone charging as you're looking at it. So just have the phone on the other side of the room. These are just basic things, but I think you really need to remember them.
Well, but that's a challenge, Mary, because who's going to bring you up coffee if you don't have a phone to ring down? But I think one of the things that always strikes me too about sleep, back to your question, is that around sleep hygiene and the notion of not only about the time, but about how you prepare to go to sleep. You know, the notion that I'm going to go up now, get into my pajamas, wash my teeth, get into bed and I'll be asleep in 5 minutes. Some people are blessed with that ability, but it's around how we begin to slow the rhythm of the day down. There's no point in sort of saying, I'll just have a quick look at this lecture now that I missed today, and then after that I'm going to go to sleep. The likelihood of that happens is fairly slim, because you're stimulating your brain to do something totally different. So it's about relaxing yourself down and having routines that you know are generating or will help you to sleep. And that is about, you might be reading something quiet. I like reading poetry. Sometimes people listen to a bit of music, or they might listen, but something that's not going to stimulate you. Likewise, in terms of even the temperature of your room, having a room that's too warm, not a good idea, because your body just it lets you know during the night, I'm too hot here, and it's time to get up. Or the idea of even going to the loo, things that people do that you actually help your body to actually relax and settle down. I had one friend, and he used to love eating Chinese food late at night, and he couldn't understand why he couldn't go to sleep, and he was doing two totally contradictory things. You know, he was trying to digest food at the same time as going to sleep. Bit of a challenge, and he was finding that once he changed that pattern, then life changed remarkably well for him. So there's very practical things you can do, but also think about that routine. Yeah.
And also, one thing I forgot to mention is caffeine is a real problem. I know students are inclined to have constantly a mug of coffee by them, especially when you're looking at your online lecture. So even switching to decaf for a while could make a huge difference. And there's some really good decaf brands out there. You wouldn't even know the difference. And the other thing, as Peter was saying, to break to make a break, have a little space between work and going to sleep. So, perhaps there's a series you're watching on TV. So watch that at one time every day. Don't binge watch the whole series. Don't sit down and watch The Crown for the whole day. Take an episode at a time. Have something to look forward to. I'll finish this lecture and then I'll watch that episode, or have look at some movies. There's a great site now called Mubi where you can pretty reasonable, and you can watch these nice world movies, and in a way you're learning things as well as trying to making use of this period where you're at home a lot, and or reading, tackle Tolstoy, something like that. Have something positive come out of this period in your lives.
And I think the relational piece about that, for many of you, you're probably at home or you're in accommodation, and you might not have spoken to anybody all day, and you might not have spoken to anybody all week. It's about making an effort to communicate with people, to engage with them. Go down and say hello to your mother and father, to your brothers and sisters, to other people in the place, and just saying hello and chatting, talking rubbish, asking them how they are, what are they at, rather than sort of saying, you should have heard the lecture that I heard today. Do you want to hear about this? Mostly they're going to put their fingers in their ears. So talk about things that people will engage with, but because communication is great, because it also helps our mood and helps us to actually feel better about ourselves. When somebody comes over and says, you're okay, well done, that was good, how are you coping? Are you going okay? All those things that we normally take for granted, they can go out. A lot of them have gone out the window. And for those of you, I also am very conscious that being at home, many of you could be in relationships with people, as in intimate relationships with them, and you might not have seen them for bloody months. And that can be really difficult, because it doesn't do relationships a lot of good having distance. So how do you keep contact with somebody? How do you make plans that when we're free to move and travel, that we can go back and say hello to people? So, and they can be really, really important. And they also need to be nurtured and not taken for granted. Or the notion that in my world is that, well, I didn't contact you because you didn't contact me, and that's the way it's going to be. And that's the road to nowhere. It requires a lot of generosity in relationships to reach out and say, hello, how are you? And to check in, and to do that regularly.
So just going on that, actually, just rewinding back to when you were talking about kind of the diet, and you mentioned not to be eating noodles and whatnot and pot noodles all the time. I was just wondering, is there any kind of scientific dietary advice you can give us with relation to, fueling our brains and having a happier mindset? That's probably quite difficult, but
Yes, I'm not a nutritionist, but there's a lot of there's a lot of evidence now for omega-3 being very good for your brain function and your cognitive function in general. I think it's important to think about that. Eat fish if you can, but linseed, seeds, nuts. You can eat, or supplements, vitamin supplements. But I think it's as we mentioned earlier, just living on chicken nuggets and pizzas is really not good for your mood. Too much processed food is really quite harmful for your body and your mind. I would recommend people would go on a no meat day or a no meat week, or try going vegan for a while, and suddenly you'll just have to think about food in an entirely different way, and you'll get yourself out of your habits of, I'm just going to put on a breast of chicken and potato and veg. So it'll be, you know, I have to think about this a bit more, and food might become exciting again. I'm not saying you should stay on a vegan diet for a long time, but it's a good way of setting a little challenge, and actually you feel better with that kind of diet. Many people do, some people don't. So you have to find what works for you. But too much meat, heavy food is not good, and eating too late at night isn't great either.
Yeah, and I think I would fit in with that, Mary, in terms of that idea of having a routine for eating. You know, trying to punctuate the day with having a breakfast, having a lunch, and having something to eat in the evening. Because quite often as a student, they can get blended into one, as in it might happen and it might not. So about having a routine. The other one is about not only about food, it's back to the thing that I would think about is hydration. Forget about, you need to stay hydrated. You'll survive. You know, you'll not die of hunger, but you will die from hydration if you don't look after your body that way. And I think also, as Mary mentioned earlier, about not eating on your own. Having a routine if you're at home to actually eat with your family, eat with someone, or if you're in accommodation, find somebody else and say, you know, will we cook together? Do you mind if we might cook at the same time, and we'll sit down and eat together. It's the idea that we're social animals, we know, and you know, COVID has invited us to be isolationist in terms of look after yourself. Is that to counteract that is to actually do things that are social. Get out and have a coffee. One of the things in Trinity that we've encouraged in students is to come back into college. Don't be out there on your own, but to come back in, even to just visit the place. And it might be that you want to study, to book some library time to go and do some study, or to meet up with a friend and say, look, we'll meet in college, we'll have a coffee and we'll go for a virtual walk around the place. But it's actual physically seeing someone and sitting beside somebody is much, much better than looking at them through Zoom.
Yeah.
And what would you say are some good mental practices to maintain a healthy and positive mindset? So, you know, I've heard of mindfulness as one of them, or would that be the main one, or are there any others as well?
Well, mindfulness is very popular at the moment. It's not for everyone, and I think Peter has some interesting ideas about this. That mindfulness is quite inward. So some people can't tolerate that much, you know, inward looking. I say meditation is also a very useful practice, but some people can actually get the same effect from exercise or from cooking or from reading. So I you know, I think there are other ways. It's all about focusing on something to take you out of yourself. So whatever can achieve that for yourself, I think that is key. And no matter how bad you feel, going out for a walk will help. You know, and it doesn't. Some people find a run, but I think a run or a walk, it always makes things better.
Yeah. My thing when I'm thinking about that is that it's like anything. It's the notion of moderation. Do things. Do a little of everything. Run the notion of I'm going into the gym and an hour and a half later I can't even walk, but I did a great gym session. You know, I think that's just mad thinking. It's the idea of going in, doing a specific piece of exercise and leaving. You know, things that in terms of looking after your mental health, about reading poetry, watching a movie, going out for a walk, and talking, I think, is a really helpful thing to do. Talk to people that you know, somebody you know, have a chat. For other people, it can be that idea of mindfulness or meditation and prayer. Going to a church, sitting down for 5 minutes and just doing nothing. Lighting a candle and remembering somebody who has died that you know. Because Mary and I were talking about this, and I suppose one of the things that I have found useful for myself is that when I'm out for a walk, is the idea of using my senses rather than putting in earplugs or earphones and listening to some music, or is to actually just don't have anything, but to go for a walk. And the metaphor of turning the volume up and down, to actually go out and say, What am I going to see for the next 5 minutes? So to pay attention, what am I seeing? So looking up at the sky, looking at the buildings, looking at what's going on around you, but just to look and see, what can I see? And to just pay attention to what can I see? And then to turn the volume down metaphorically on your what I can see, but to turn up the volume on what can I hear? So it might be, what am I hearing for the next 5 minutes? It might be the birds. It might be the leaves rustling. It might be traffic. It might be silence. Just the idea of what can I hear? So I'm present at that moment. So what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, and what I'm smelling, and also the same with what I'm feeling. What do I feel through my feet? What do I feel? And what can I smell? I can smell the roses, whatever it is. So using your senses. So this isn't about magic thinking. It's around using the resources that we have, and they're really brilliant resources we have, our senses, and to use them in a way, and to do it regularly. Because not to do it once and you say, that was rubbish, so I didn't do that again. You have to, it's like all these things, you got to practice. You got to practice seeing, hearing, smelling, feeling. You've got to practice this. And so that you get, and that when you get in tune with your own body, then back to the very first question that we started off with, the catastrophic thinking, that you then become more aware of what's going on in your own body. And then you can say, no, I know I'll be okay. Or yes, I do need to check that. So that'd be some of the thoughts I'd have.
Okay, so I will now just quickly move on to more of the supports and knowing when it's appropriate to access supports, such as like mental health services. I know a lot of people find it difficult, firstly, even just booking an appointment, say, with a counsellor or seeking out help. But I think now more than ever, it's even more difficult because I think, you're already overrun. And then the online aspect where you can't actually go and have a face-to-face meeting with anyone, and people they're quite intimidated by this sort of meeting, for lack of a better word.
Firstly, I think the people who need to access support should do. I mean, there's a lot of concerns now that people who need to contact medical services or psychological supports are holding back, and there is the capacity there, and the services are coping at the moment, so there's no need to feel I'm overburdening people and they're too busy. They're not. You should still get in touch. And in fact, in some ways, I think a lot of the colleges in particular have laid on extra support. So this is actually in some ways a good time to reach out to the services. So please don't feel that you're not serious. It's not serious enough to reach out. It'll always make things better, and it's much better to reach out early rather than when things have got to a crisis stage.
Yeah, really important. I think that when I think about that question is that it's a bit like physician heal thyself, that as medical students and as doctors, that quite often you self-diagnose, and usually it's not erring on the side of I need help. It's usually what's wrong with you? I can tough it out. Or if I have another drink, that'll sort it. Or if I shout at somebody, that'll sort it. It doesn't. It's around looking for support, and also to listen to yourself, because as soon as that question comes up, am I okay? Then do something about it. Because quite often we say, am I okay? And 6 months later, I'm still asking myself the same question. It's stacked early. And whether that's to look for support through college, through your peers, through the medical services in college, or through the student support services in college is really, really important. And that there is no minimum requirement for getting in. You don't have to be at the end of your tether. You don't have to be feeling that your life is, that you're thinking about ending your life. By that time, you're thinking, why didn't you come earlier? So it's about saying to people, don't wait until the disaster is about to happen. Go look for help. And hopefully you get the appropriate help that you're looking for. And also I think that, so that piece about listening to yourself, but also listen to those that are closest to you, whether they're your friends or your family or your partner. Listen to them. And if they're saying, geez, you're ratty, or what's wrong with you? Listen to it. They're not doing it just for the fun, that they have picked up something. They've either heard something or feel something, or they just know something's not right. Do listen to them and have a conversation, sort of say, what is it that you've noticed? well, you know, and that you can have a conversation and then say, well, it might be that the one thing that you might need is a hug that day. You might just be feeling, I am really fed up. Can I have a hug, please? So it's around. So it's not. This is not just the extreme end of I need medication to manage myself here. It can be. I need somebody to say hello. I need somebody to tell me it will be okay. I need somebody to say bloody COVID will go away. So it's very personal, but also involves other people, and that the colleges hopefully will respond. And as Mary says, they've put a lot of resources into it because they know you're a very vulnerable community of people and a very precious community of people. So we don't want anything to happen to you. Yeah.
And would you have any tips for people accessing mental health supports online rather than the previous face-to-face services?
There's no particular tips, Anurag. It's just a different way of you know, doing it. But okay, it's not as good, and Peter would agree. I think that you know it's not the same, but it's a good second best, and it's all we have at the moment. So people should make as much of it as they can, and most services actually do have a facility for face-to-face. If people really feel that they can't engage online, you can request a face-to-face appointment, and that can be arranged. So you know there's always ways around this.
Yeah. Yeah, and there may be people who, you know, as I say, you can get hopefully contact with the services, whether it's Trinity, UCD, Galway, Cork, wherever, that there are resources there to tap into. But likewise, to be patient with yourself. I've lost what I was going to say, but it was around the idea of how do you find a way to counteract, particularly, you know, Dr. Facebook and Dr. Google are wonderful things that you can go on there, and there's somebody who's definitely sure that you've got all the symptoms of, not only did you think of COVID, but you have 9,000 other things. Or, you know, the anti-vaxxers will tell you that everything's rubbish. There's lots of people out there who give you lots of lovely information, and it's about sort of being very discerning, if at all possible. And the expectation is that you're a medical student, you should be doing that. But don't be surprised, you're 20, 21, 22, 23 years of age, and social media is your ballpark. So you can find yourself all over the place. So it's about being quite discerning around it. Also, I think that there are very specific things that can come up for people around, you're in that age profile group too, about relationships and about your own sexuality and about your own gender. And they're very specific things that come up for people. So it's also looking at resources, and they will be up for you. And a lot of the colleges have services specifically for people around the LGBT persons, and just about offering support. So there are supports for people. Also, I've worked with people who've got eating disorders, all sorts of, and people who are depressed or suffering from anxiety. Or there's lots of very specific issues, concerns that people bring with them. And it's around, they want to identify the person that can work specifically with what they've got. So it is about colleges try and respond in as best they can to each of them, that people aren't feeling excluded. Well, they didn't name my issue, so I'm not going. That you're better off going and then see if they can find somebody, or that they can work with you and help you. So don't feel isolated, that you're on your own.
And, you know, for some people, actually, the online might work better. So, you know, in terms of getting to an appointment geographically, it's much easier. And some people find, you know, maybe being in a room with a therapist that they don't know a bit overwhelming. So, you know, there are two sides to it as well. And there's always phone appointments if people don't like online, and that's happening a lot lately.
And it can be a real challenge for people coming to services. Like, I'm in my 60s, an elderly man, and you're 21, a young woman, and you're thinking, the hell would he know anything of? So, and it's to acknowledge that. And some people come in and they say, no, I don't want to talk to you because you're a man, because you're older, you remind me of something. So that's grand. So it's about just acknowledging to yourself. So you're a consumer. You know, you don't go into the supermarket and take any old thing that sits there that says that it's a breakfast cereal. You're going looking for something specific. So there's something around to be discerning and say, no, I'm okay with that, or no, that doesn't fit exactly. And is there a person that I can talk to? And hopefully there is, but if there isn't, then you can find that the old fella sitting in the corner might have some wisdom and might be able to talk to you, or the older woman too, whatever.
We've gone on quite a while now, so I think we'll just finish it up briefly with we've discussed relationships a bit, but if you are worried about a loved one, like over Christmas or just in general, would you have any advice for that?
Well, the key thing is just to look out for changes in behaviour. That's often an indication of something that's going on with somebody, and they won't talk about it. And you know, as we always say, just reach out and ask, is everything okay? But don't feel that if the answer is, if the answer is disturbing to you and someone is really suffering, you don't have to take that on yourselves. And I think at this stage, there are a lot of supports around, and we can give you some tips to, there's the text line service, the crisis text line, and you have people there who can deal with there's the college supports, which are very extensive and available all through the Christmas period. There's Jigsaw has some online. Spun Out has a lot of advice lines. There's a lot of help out there now, so don't feel you have to start giving advice yourself. You could say, well, listen, I think you should go to this service, and I think this is really good, and they'll help, and I'm here for you if you need me, but don't feel you have to start turning yourself into a therapist.
Yeah, and likewise that, at Christmas time, that there are times when people might feel that that is life worth living, that they might want to self-harm, or they might want to take their own life. And again, if you're working, or if you're in contact with them, what do you do? And it is that it's to be there to support them if you can, but also to look for help. And as Mary has mentioned, through the colleges, through your local GP, through the college GP, also the emergency department attached to the local hospital. Go find somebody, phone an ambulance, contact the Samaritans, contact Pieta, put them in contact with Samaritans, put them in contact with Pieta House, that you don't have to be on your own in this situation, because it's very frightening for you, but it's also probably very frightening for the person that you love. And just to literally physically give them a hug and hold them and tell them that it'll be okay. And also not to be on your own, that if you find yourself talking to a friend, then get another friend. You don't have to be on your own. A community of people can be involved in helping. And that you might be the person who's in the front line talking to your friend, but you've got the backup of your other friends who are there to give you some advice, if that's what you're looking for. But also the backup of colleges, GPs, the hospitals. You don't have to, and literally an ambulance if you need some. And that you never be criticized that you overreacted. No, that it's about, at that moment, you did the best thing that you thought was right, and to go and act on it. And now, because that's much, much better. Because I suppose, unfortunately, met people who've lived with a lot of regret. Why didn't I? I should have. Why didn't I do something? It's to say, yeah, I've tried. At this moment, I did my best.
Yeah.
And then just the final question. Would you have any tips for maintaining healthy romantic relationships during lockdowns? Especially if they're, this is two-way, if they're separated or if they're stuck together,
I think even that term, stuck together, if you're feeling you're stuck together with someone, then maybe the relationship isn't going to last. But I suppose, as we were saying earlier, COVID, I suppose what it does is it's amplified everything. So if the relationship has been a little difficult or having problems before, and then COVID is going to expose those cracks even more. But in a lot of cases, people who you know, you can have a stronger relationship too, and just make sure to keep the bond up. You know, that you keep in touch. You know, there's a lot of scope now for, you can still meet up in person, just outside. You go for walks. You know, there shouldn't be an excuse not to meet up at all. If you're having a relationship, and you have to find inventive ways of maintaining that relationship as much as possible.
I think for me, that if there was words that come into my head when I think of relationships, I suppose the first relationship is the one with yourself. And if you're feeling okay yourself, then, and you meet somebody else who's feeling okay, then the likelihood of you being able to work through situations or issues is fairly good. But if you're not that comfortable with yourself, it's always very difficult. But the words that come to my mind when I think of relationships with myself and with anybody else is developing a sense of compassion. Compassion for the other person or for yourself. Sense of care. Saying, are you okay? And saying, I love you. You're a good friend. I value your friendship. Kindness. Doing something kind. Making them a cup of tea. Sending them a Christmas card. Buying them a present. Sending them a text to say, how are you keeping? Are you all right? All that stuff. And I think the other one is that for couples is about forgiveness. Forgiveness as in saying, you're okay. You know, the world hasn't ended, you know, and, you know, we can make this better. How are you doing? And to learn, if we can learn and hold on to some of those things, they sound like things that are, oh, that's old hat, that's what me granny talks about. But that's why your granny talks about them, because they've held through over generations. So being kind, being compassionate, being caring, being loving towards someone else, being loving towards yourself, they're the things that can help in relationships, rather than the notion of saying, no, I have given you 10 problem solving strategies. Now you work through that and see which one fits with your needs. You know, you're saying, geez, that's great. But that's not what you're looking for. You know, problem solving, we can do that, and you can learn that. But the other stuff requires time, and it does. And to acknowledge the difficulties of separation, to acknowledge the difficulties of distance, and just that we're under a lot of pressure. Yeah. So hopefully.
But there is hope. You know, this isn't going to last forever, and you know, next year could be very different. But you know, I say, think about the we shouldn't all get too hooked on the restrictions that we're all under at the moment. We should look at what we can do, and if you like, as Prof. Kelly was saying, as the permissions as well, and it's just a chance to change things and do things a little different. So so it will, yes, there is an end in sight now, and we'll be back to normal. And then we may look back on this time and say, you know, that was a really interesting time we lived through, and you know, especially as medical students, you've been there on the front line, and other students too. So, okay, well, listen, it was great talking to you guys, and I hope everything goes well over the Christmas for you. And I hope this is helpful to people in some ways. It seems like we're giving a lot of advice, but it's not that easy to follow it all the time. But it, I suppose we've lived through a bit of time ourselves, Peter, haven't we? We've sort of from our ancient, you know, age, we could look back on things and see what did help or did not help when we were younger, you know.
And don't forget to have a laugh. Remember to laugh. Silly jokes and laughing are a brilliant panacea for all when you're not feeling too good. And particularly dad jokes are really good. So when your dad jokes, listen to him. They're really important. Dad jokes are good.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you both very much for joining us this afternoon. You've given us a lot of really wonderful advice and a lot to think about too. I know I'm definitely guilty of going from the desk to the bed and, you know, not necessarily making enough time for my friends or anything like that, especially at the moment. So yes, a lot of wise words.
Okay, well, good luck, guys.
Good luck with it.
And
have a good
thanks for organising it. I hope it'll be helpful to people. Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thank you both for joining us in this conversation today. I'm sure we've all learned a lot. You've given us some great advice, and we'll link all of the resources you mentioned and some others along with this video. Thank you.